Since the late 1930s, the concept of the superhero has gripped the hearts and fascinated the minds of the general public. Figureheads representing the very best of the human spirit developed into their own distinct pantheon that's so etched into pop culture that it's impossible to imagine a world without their influence, yet so easy to see how their existence has inspired new stories, characters, and creators the world over. We recognize how these fictional beings can serve as inspiration to do and be better through the narratives they weave, the hardships they endure, and the traits they display. A personal favorite of mine being Spider-Man, who is known for suffering but finding the strength to pick himself up and continue staring down the barrel of impossible odds. Yet the very foundation of Spider-Man is the idea that anyone can put on the mask and be Spider-Man, so long as you're willing to do what's right and help those who need it, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.
On the other side of the coin, Batman is one of my favourites, as he's solely driven by the pursuit of justice, so nobody will experience the pain he did, and he does so despite having no superpowers of any description. Well, maybe a giant bank account.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
But superheroes can also be vehicles for telling compelling stories with relevant social commentary. The best example being the mere existence of the X-Men, whose narrative takes on an obvious allegory for discrimination and persecution without sacrificing the ideas or concepts that make the X-Men heroes to begin with. Was Magneto right? Was Charles right? The purpose isn't to explicitly say which ideology is right or wrong, it's to bring forward a conversation between readers and viewers about the very real issues of our world. We live in an age where the biggest film franchise in cinema history revolved exclusively around superheroes, and that love of comic book heroes undoubtedly gave us the subject of today's discussion, My Hero Academia. Written and illustrated by Kohei Horikoshi, My Hero Academia began its lifespan in Weekly Shonen Jump on July 7th, 2014. It actually came after his previous series had unfortunately been cancelled after just 2 volumes, which ridiculously isn't all that strange of a situation in the brutally competitive landscape of serialized manga. My Hero Academia is built on the skeleton of a one-shot he'd published in a different magazine entitled My Hero, so he'd already had a general idea for how he wanted the story to go, though naturally it was iterated upon to shape it into the story we're familiar with today. Additionally, Horikoshi has stated before that he's a big fan of American comics and films, like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films and X-Men, both of which he pulled elements from to mold the way he needed, and it shows. While My Hero Academia does absolutely tackle the kinds of themes we're all familiar with, most notably what it means to be a hero, Horikoshi is most certainly not afraid to explore the uncomfortable hypocrisy and chaos that exists on the other side of that very same coin, while purposely maintaining and even reinforcing his optimistic view of heroism. In a 2016 article, The Heroic Spirit of My Hero Academia, Nick Creamer sums this up quite concisely when he writes, "The show is actually somewhat noteworthy for its positive view of heroes. In the modern world, we often challenge heroic ideals and the motivations of the people who pursue them. In American media, the bright-eyed optimism of the Silver Age gave way to post-Watchmen ambiguity, and now our on-screen heroes battle their personal demons as often as they do their enemies. In Japan, modern revisions of classic shows like Yatterman and Gatchaman don't just challenge unquestioned heroism, they often prioritize the hypocrisy and potential tragedy that can erupt when a hero is too certain that their justice is correct. It's these shifting paradigms and how we view heroes that pull the themes of My Hero Academia together in ways that keep me so invested in its unfolding saga. And while this is going to be a long journey over the course of quite a few videos, today we're going to take the time to discuss Season 1 of the anime adaptation in its entirety, from the characters and themes, the narrative and world building, and even a few of Season 1's shortcomings. For those of you who are fans of My Hero Academia but are new to this channel, primarily because I've spent a good chunk of my time talking about Yu Yu Hakusho,
Do you think Hiei suspects anything? Yeah, probably.
welcome. I'm Saturn, a professional dumpster fire whose upload frequency is matched only by the speed of a mid-2000s webpage. Today I'm being joined by my friend, community member, and fellow anime enthusiast, Rosentic, whose voice you heard a little earlier. If you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself for the folks at home.
Hey guys, I'm Rosentic, an Australian hot mess who somehow survived every deadly creature on the continent. It's great to be here with my friend Saturn, discussing an anime that I love, flaws and all. My Hero Academia is undoubtedly a huge hit, with the manga recently joining the 100 million sales club as one of only 20 series to achieve that level of success. It's been justifiably praised by many, including the likes of One Piece's Eiichiro Oda and Masashi Kishimoto, the creator of Naruto. However, while My Hero Academia has a devoted fan base, the show also has its fair share of detractors. Which is fine! As Saturn always says, art is subjective. And while it would be incredibly arrogant and unfair to say you're wrong for disliking something, I hope that by the end of this video, you'll start to understand why the people who love My Hero Academia love it so much.
That in itself should be your indication that this is going to contain heavy spoilers for the first season of this show. So if you're one of the few people who hasn't seen My Hero Academia, this is the time for you to click away. If you don't care about spoilers or are caught up with the anime, you're allowed to stay, but only if you drink some water and let me know who your favorite student in class 1A is. There's only one wrong answer. There will also be timestamps for the chapters in case you need to come back later. Without any further delay, let's go on ahead and dive into today's discussion.
The series opens with our protagonist, Izuku Midoriya, defending another child from Katsuki Bakugou, another of our principal characters, an obvious foil to Izuku. It's obvious at a glance that Izuku, who we're going to be referring to as Deku from here on out with an explanation of this nickname to come a little later, is defenseless and petrified. Yet despite this and being outnumbered, Deku doesn't back down. Bakugou is taken aback, but clearly finds amusement in Deku's posturing, drawing attention to Deku's quirklessness. This brief exchange already tells us so much about who Deku is as a person, but gives us just as much information about Bakugou. They're so young in this prologue, yet we see Deku's willingness to put himself in harm's way to help someone in need, and we see Bakugou's willingness to trample on those around him. Bakugou condescends to Deku for his efforts, saying that he's pretending to be a hero, which demonstrates to the audience that Bakugou has no idea what it truly means to be a hero just yet. Deku promptly gets beaten down by the trio of bullies, which funnels us into some narrative exposition that lays out the groundwork for many of the themes to come over the course of this season. All men are not created equal is Deku's very first voiceover and is a powerful statement to open with. Deku's confrontation with Bakugou seared this universal truth into his spirit, but he acknowledges that this moment in his life was his first and last setback. For now, we're going to put a pin in the all men are not created equal line and circle back to it a bit later on where we can really unpack it. For now, it's important to understand the foundation on which this world is built, and that's the concept of a quirk. Beginning with a baby born in China that emitted light, people all over the world began to manifest all sorts of strange powers or abilities. These abilities became known as quirks. Though the cause of this was never identified, before long, the supernatural became a part of normal everyday life. With the discovery and proliferation of quirks, the world pivoted toward a superhero society with approximately 80% of the population having some sort of special trait. It's like X-Men meets The Incredibles in a lot of ways, some of which is obvious, some of which is a bit more subtle.
When Deku sees a giant villain, everything from his words to his body language shows he's absolutely thrilled instead of being afraid. In fact, no one in the crowd is afraid or concerned. In any other story, they'd be running and screaming. Here, they're crowded around to watch this monstrosity destroy his surroundings, because they know that the heroes will come at any moment and their faith is rewarded right away. They're so unbothered by the potential threat that we can tell this is just another day for the spectators. In fact, people are going so far as to scoff at the giant villain for committing a crime as petty as purse snatching, as though to say he's wasting his potential with a quirk like that. You can even hear someone say he's been held up by another villain and will be late to work, but he says it in that tone that indicates it's little more than a minor inconvenience. Following that same sense of inconvenience, the hero Kamui Woods, who is actively confronting the purse snatcher, proceeds to scold the villain for making a scene during rush hour. When that's considered the big crime you're committing, you know this world is not like ours. Granted, I think it's fair to say that anyone who holds up traffic is a villain too, but let's not split hairs. It's made apparent to the audience from Deku's excited spectating that he has a deep reverence for those who take on the role of hero. He can and does easily rattle off information about Kamui Woods with the same fervor I display when trying to explain why D&D occupies so much space in my brain at 3 AM to my friends when all they want to do is go to sleep. With the rise of quirks also came a drastic rise in crime, which, oh no, who could have seen this coming? The bureaucracy of the police and the slow progress to draft reform for law enforcement to keep pace with the tidal wave of emerging quirks led to people taking it upon themselves to stand up for what was right in the name of justice, the way we all typically associate with comic books. This vigilantism directly led to heroes being accepted by the general public, which ultimately resulted in the role being cemented as an official occupation. Their performance determines their pay from the government, but also determines how much respect and admiration they receive from the masses. While the pay from the government is obviously nothing to turn their noses up at, we quickly see just how much of the hero game is geared towards trying to win over the masses. We immediately see this in play when Mount Lady literally crashes the party and steals the limelight, not just by subduing the villain, but with her hero costume, which is very clearly designed to win points via sex appeal. Kamui Woods, as mentioned by Deku slightly earlier, is also a relatively newer hero and was clearly handling the situation just fine on his own. This didn't stop Mount Lady from intervening and undermining his efforts to shift the crowd's attention to her, boosting her own ego, but more importantly, her popularity. The next time we see Deku after that situation, he is diligently detailing what he saw Mount Lady do, assessing her quirk as well as noting the collateral property damage that goes with her power. It's evident that he's an analytical and forward-thinking individual. This is an immediate indication to the audience that even though Deku might be defenseless in a physical fight, he's got an impressively analytical and eager mind with a thirst for
knowledge.
That already gives him a relatable trait for a great deal of viewers, I'd imagine, since the anime community loves to analyze and discuss, for better and worse. At school, Deku and Bakugou's teacher comments that he anticipates everyone will go into the hero course after middle school. But just gazing around at some of these students, I can't imagine most of them would even be remotely useful. Like this guy. You mean to tell me if you're buried under debris in a building that could collapse at any moment, that you'd be relieved to see this guy? We get some characterization for Bakugou when he rejects the idea of being lumped into the same group as his peers, whom he refers to as rejects, and I just know this guy felt personally attacked. This gives the audience the first signs of Bakugou's inflated sense of self-worth. He's confident enough to mock them to their faces based solely on how powerful his own quirk is.
Say what you want about his behavior, you gotta respect the balls on this kid. He's ragging on the entire class in front of the teacher, who not only does nothing to correct him, but the targets of his insults actually agree with him. It's revealed to the class that he intends to go to UA High, a top-performing national school. Due to the fact he's already aced the mock test, he believes he's the only student in the entire school that's even capable of making it into UA. Just how confident and or arrogant, take your pick, do you have to be to assume you're essentially a shoo-in for the most elite hero school with an atrociously low acceptance rate? Admittedly, Bakugou does have the kind of powerful quirk that lends itself to high confidence, which, as we've seen, has been bolstered by everyone around him. With his ultimate goal being to surpass the world's current top hero, All Might, he's going to need that confidence in the long run.
In a moment of visual comedy, it comes to light that Deku also wants to go to UA. Naturally, everyone laughs in his face because, as said earlier, Deku has no quirk. Bakugou accosts Deku by making it abundantly clear that he ranks Deku lower than the rejects he was just mocking exclusively because of his quirklessness. As such, how could he even stand in the same arena as someone like Bakugou? It's even more characterization that lays a solid foundation for where his character development ultimately leads him. Elsewhere in the same city, a sludge villain, who I'm just going to refer to as Goop Juice because it makes me happy, is on the run after a robbery. Following this robbery, we see a slender man come out of a convenience store and after hearing the bystanders talking amongst themselves, takes on a larger form before revealing himself to be the hero All Might, who, as we just discussed, is the hero Bakugou's hoping to one day surpass, so it draws our focus as the viewer to what this hero is capable of and what he'll do next.
Horikoshi has stated that All Might is one of the many shonen characters directly inspired by Goku, but in a different way than other popular characters like Luffy or Naruto. All Might isn't oblivious to the world around him, obsessed with the concept of fighting, or regularly wishing for food. Instead, Horikoshi said he loved the idea of All Might being the ace in the hole, a surefire guarantee of victory that everybody waits for. It's less about the character traits and more about the hope Goku inspires. All Might's legacy in this universe behaves much like a goal that everyone wants to reach, and we see the influence of these threads of hope and aspiration play out repeatedly over the lifetime of this story. This is the first time we hear All Might's phrase, "because I am here," which is an affirmation that things will be alright. This line distills and encapsulates the very essence of All Might's hero work, as well as the inspiration Horikoshi took from Goku, but we'll circle back around to this in just a little bit.
Back at school, Bakugou snatches the notebook Deku's been writing in, something labeled Hero Analysis for the Future. Using his explosive quirk, Bakugou damages the notebook and tosses it out the window. Not only is he using his quirk for a very unheroic purpose here, but he immediately follows up by telling Deku to walk off the edge of the nearest tall building. Think about that for a second. This kid who brags about wanting to be the hero who surpasses All Might just told someone to unalive themselves. What a horrifying thing to say. I don't know about you, but at this point on my first watch, I wanted to see someone kick his ass to Kingdom Come. For the sake of his own ego, Bakugou attempts to intimidate Deku out of applying to UA. These moments double his characterization for not just Bakugou, but Deku as well. He lacks the courage to stand up for himself, especially in the absence of a quirk. Even when he feels the urge to, he fails to follow through and backs down. Yet, just based on how this world works, it's easy to assume that if Deku had a quirk, even if it wasn't useful, he wouldn't be getting berated by Bakugou at every available opportunity. Deku eventually retrieves his notebook, but the viciousness of his treatment at the hands of someone like Bakugou is clearly getting to him. This is when we're treated to a flashback to Deku as a toddler who is obsessed with a clip of his personal hero, All Might. He watches in amazement as All Might not only quickly saves lives, but does so with a smile on his face. It's easy to see why he'd be inspired to follow in the footsteps of someone like All Might. Deku vows to be just like him when he gets his quirk.
And like a cosmic act of cruelty, in the very next scene, he's told he doesn't have one. Normally, a quirk manifests by age 4, inherited directly from one parent or developing a combination from both. But Deku rolled a genetic critical failure and ended up just a normal kid. Naturally, with everything he wanted to be relying on the idea of manifesting a quirk, the news is world-shattering for Deku. Keep this doctor in the back of your mind. He'll end up playing an enormous role in the story way later on, or if you really pay attention, much sooner than you think. Afterward, we see Deku watching the same clip from before, but the circumstances and presentation are completely mirrored. This time he's watching it in the dark, and that bubbly, joyful, golden retriever energy is nowhere to be found. This time he's quiet, nearly motionless and broken-hearted. Deku is now facing the reality that his dream of being a hero may be outside of his reach forever. However, that deep sadness is what steeled his resolve to work hard and find a way to become a hero, no matter what others thought of him. It's worth mentioning at this point that Deku is quite unique among shonen protagonists. He has no power, he's not charismatic, and he's not even particularly tough, especially at this point in the series. He's a 15-year-old kid who cries as naturally as he breathes. And you know what? Thank goodness! It's amazing to see a very sensitive and timid male protagonist who can get overwhelmed. We don't get to see that very often, and it's so great that it never undercuts his more badass side or heroic moments. Not to mention, these traits add to his character development and, just as importantly, serve as a direct and comparable contrast between Deku and Bakugou. They're both chasing pretty much the exact same dream, but are functionally and narratively polar opposites of one another. Deku is also being almost, if not exclusively, raised by his mother. Horikoshi has said that Inko Midoriya has essentially raised Deku as a single parent. Deku's father, apparently named Hisashi Midoriya, has only ever been mentioned in this scene where his quirk is brought up, and to this day we have yet to see him in the manga or anime. Though to be fair, anime seems to hate parents in general if you're a protagonist. In most anime I can think of, you either get one parent or you're an orphan. Having two parents and keeping both parents is like hitting the anime lottery.
Wait. So you mean there's two of them in your household?
Once we cut back to present day, Deku is attacked by Goop Juice, who intends to take over his body. Things look grim until All Might shows up and effortlessly frees Deku from the villain's grasp, giving the audience a small inkling of what he's capable of.
His triumphant musical theme starts again, so we've already been conditioned to associate the tune with him. If you listen to the track on its own, it's quite inspiring. I'll even admit to using it on my personal writing and workout playlists. All Might shows how pleasant his public-facing persona is, and even signs Deku's notebook for him before preparing to leave to take the villain he captured to the police. Even though he's had a close brush with death, Deku seems relatively unfazed because, well, All Might is here! I refuse to apologize for that joke. Again, this really emphasizes just how revered and even worshipped All Might is in the eyes of the general public, but more specifically, Deku.
Making his exit, All Might launches himself into the air with the intent of taking the villain he bottled to the police, only to discover Deku has latched onto his leg because there were things he still wanted to ask. This is also where we get our first inkling that something isn't right with All Might when he coughs up a bit of blood. Once they safely land on the building's rooftop, All Might does his best to get away from Deku. Remembering the hurtful words of his peers and the sadness of his mother, Deku poses the question to All Might if it's possible for him to become a hero even though he has no quirk. Deku compounds this by asking if it's possible for someone without a quirk to become like All Might, someone who can save people with a smile and stand as a beacon of hope for those who need it. Before All Might can get away or even answer the question Deku posed, he deflates, so to speak, into his base state that the world doesn't know about, affectionately referred to by pockets of the community as Small Might. It's a very stylized design and couldn't be more different from his muscular and imposing hero form. There's no natural smile to Small Might, and when you look into his eyes, the scleras are filled with darkness, which is an incredible design choice, particularly in the absence of the smile he's known for. That darkness is also representative of the weight of what he carries around and the pain of his past that we won't know about for quite some time. Deku freaks out right away upon seeing Small Might. It's the kind of reaction that a child would have seeing the actor playing Mickey Mouse at Disneyland removing the costume head. But in all fairness, if I saw my personal hero shrink and immediately spew blood from their mouth, I'd probably react the same way.
Unfortunately, Deku's intervention prevented All Might from delivering goop juice to the police, and one of the bottles containing him ends up in Tatooine Shopping District, which is one of many references to Star Wars in the series, thanks to Horikoshi being a giant fanboy of the franchise. The bottle finds its way into an alleyway that Bakugou and a couple of his buddies are making their way through. Much to Bakugou's misfortune, he inadvertently sets the villain free and is promptly targeted due to his quirk. All Might's attitude is much more subdued and far less theatrical than his public persona from just moments earlier. He shows Deku the remnants of an injury he sustained during a clash with an enemy 5 years prior, which resulted in half of his respiratory organs being destroyed and the loss of his stomach. The most pressing side effect of it all is that as of now, he can only work as a hero for roughly 3 hours a day. We've seen some of what All Might is capable of, and we're more than aware of the reputation he wields, so it's quite ominous to think what kind of villain could deal that kind of damage. All Might gives us some characterization of his own with the seriousness of tone he uses while pledging to save people with a smile. He says he does so to show the immense burden that heroes carry, as well as to trick the fear inside of him that comes with such a dangerous job where lives are constantly on the line. The smile he's so well known for is just as much for himself as it is for everyone else.
This speech brings me back around to what was said earlier about All Might being inspired by Goku in a very specific way. If you grew up watching Dragon Ball Z like we did, think back to those times during the Saiyan saga, the Frieza saga, and even the Cell saga, where you're watching the supporting cast getting beaten to hell and back. Do you remember the feeling we all shared where we knew things would get better the moment Goku showed up? There was a relief, not just for the characters, but for the audience, the instant Goku stepped up to the plate for his turn at bat. Even the side characters themselves knew that if they could just hold out until Goku arrived, everything would be alright. No matter how strong the side characters got, with the exception of narrative beats like Gohan vs. Cell, the feeling of everything will be fine because Goku is here permeated the entire series.
Next time, why don't you remember your place like the rest of them? And wait for Goku.
That kind of character-inspired hope has quite literally never been replicated by any other protagonist, despite many of them being directly inspired by Goku. All Might represents an in-universe crystallization of that very same feeling. To this world, All Might is their Goku. When hope seems lost and the heroes around are on their last legs, All Might's mere presence is enough to inspire and rally them while also setting the minds of those in harm's way at ease. To these people, All Might is more than just flashy strongman punch real good. He's the physical embodiment of "it's okay, you're safe now." On top of the weight of needing to project this deity-like beacon of hope to those who believe in him, All Might is constantly performing. In this world of heroes where almost every aspect of their careers is commercialized, commodified, and actively encouraged to compete with one another for a bigger share of the consumer base, heroes are told over and over that performance is what matters most.
I can say from experience, acting is exhausting. There's a common misconception that actors are always performing, always in character, and therefore can be hard to trust. It's nonsense. Acting is a job and nobody can do it 100% of the time. Funny story, when I was studying my music theatre degree, the major production for my class was the musical Rent. During Tech Week, or Death Week as it's more commonly known in the industry, we had 16-hour rehearsal days for 5 or 6 days in a row. This is considered more than normal for this final stage of rehearsal. And when you're running scenes and choreography over and over, climbing ladders, racing up and down stairs, changing costumes in a matter of moments while singing incredibly vocal-heavy music and navigating a pretty dangerous set, it's a lot. During the few short breaks we had, plenty of my classmates were seen sleeping anywhere they could, under the dressing room tables, the chairs in the student cafe, or sitting upright against the wall. And this was before we had even opened. When you consider what All Might does when he's in character, I'm surprised he has enough energy for 3 hours.
Much to my surprise, All Might doesn't just placate Deku by giving him a big thumbs up and saying, sure, you can definitely 100% be a hero even without a quirk. His response is much more measured, and he takes into consideration the fact that heroes risk their lives on a daily basis, so blindly encouraging Deku would be counterproductive, but worse, irresponsible. Instead, he funnels Deku's desire to help people towards a career in law enforcement, which, as long as his first day on the job doesn't go as poorly as Leon Kennedy's.
Hey, did you see that shit?
Yeah, that was the Vor demon. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it!
I think Deku would make a great detective, especially with the way he processes and analyzes data. Imagine what a huge help he'd be in closing cases.
As a side note, in the dub, All Might's line is translated to, "If you want to help people, there are plenty other ways to do it." And this is really the only time in the series we hear anyone acknowledge that being a pro-hero isn't the only career path of any real merit or value. Oh yes, anti-dub viewers, I mentioned the dub. I will continue to do so from time to time. Not only because of some key translation differences, but there's also some great trivia to be found in the voice actor lineup, as we'll get to. I've seen the whole anime in both forms, and while I absolutely love the sub, I also happen to think the MHA dub is one of the best out there. From a casting and performance perspective, this one's about as perfect as you can get. So there. I genuinely like the sub and dub, and honestly, there are things about the dub I like just a little more than the sub. If you have a problem with this, then please buy your torches and pitchforks by calling this number. They'll be shipped to your door along with all the fucks I don't give for 4 low payments of $19.99. Speaking of the dub's vocal talent, All Might is voiced by Funimation legend Chris Sabat, who's also taken on such roles as Vegeta, Piccolo, Kuwabara, Zoro, Armstrong, and many, many more. Deku is voiced by Justin Briner, who not only sounds very similar to his Japanese counterpart, but also captures every side of Deku as the story progresses. He has this incredible ability to go from the wide-eyed timid fanboy to comedic fear and then the determined badass without batting an eye.
For those of you who don't watch My Hero dubbed but also exist in the abridged series ecosystem of YouTube, Justin Briner voiced Cloud in Team 4 Star's Final Fantasy VII Abridged.
Maybe the reason you can't act like a grown-up is because you can't get over the fact that your father was murdered!
Holy shit.
This is how I know of him, which makes any interaction I have with Dub Deku impossible to take seriously.
Bakugou is voiced by Clifford Chapin, who in my personal opinion absolutely nails it. His screams, passion and anger hit hard, but he also owns any scene that calls for raw emotion. Frankly, I think he exceeds in the emotion department when compared to the also amazing Japanese voice actor Nobuhiko Okamoto. But this isn't a contest. They're both great in their own way and for what's expected of them. The same goes for all the voice actors, sub and dub.
Breaking away from that and returning to the narrative at hand, it would have been incredibly easy to immediately make All Might the doting mentor figure, but instead he's shown to have not just layers, but a nuanced perspective and a genuine understanding of the kind of influence his words can hold over those who look up to him. There's a great line from Dumbledore in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. While explaining the Mirror of is it Erise or Earsaid? I don't know how to say this word, so I have to look it up. While explaining the Mirror of Earsaid to Harry and warning him of the potential dangers of it, he says,
"It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live."
And it's very much in the same vein as what All Might is saying here. All Might says it's not bad to dream, but one must also consider what's realistic. That's something everyone grapples with from time to time, being caught between what they dream of doing or being and being forced to acknowledge the reality of what their options actually are. Hell, I still struggle with this, and I'm sure some of you do too. As children, so many of our favorite TV shows and other media have the endless refrain of, you can be whatever you want to be, but the hard reality is that we can't. We all have different abilities and means, which limits us in our options in many ways. But in contrast, All Might himself is living an unattainable dream. He's the symbol of peace, revered as this invincible force that cannot and will not ever lose or be afraid. The very nature of his hero name suggests that he's... and nobody can carry that kind of burden. At this point in his career, even All Might is struggling to truly be All Might. Elsewhere, Goop Juice has taken Bakugou hostage and is causing quite a fuss. This time people actually are running and screaming, or at least some of them are anyway. Bakugou isn't willing to go down without a fight and is struggling to the best of his ability given the terrible situation he's found himself in. Due to a number of factors, the heroes on site are rendered ineffective against Goop Juice, and they're forced to wait for a hero with a more suitable quirk to show up. What are the odds they're waiting for All Might? I'd say pretty high, especially since he'd been seen pursuing the same enemy earlier that day. When All Might does finally arrive on scene, he's in too weak of a state to do anything other than lament his perceived powerlessness. He doesn't blame Deku here though, he blames himself. Even more so since he told Deku that he couldn't be a hero while he himself had made a careless mistake. It isn't long before Deku happens upon the scene where the villain is wreaking havoc. He is surprised to see Goop Juice, having understood him to have been effectively restrained by All Might. Deku then comes to the realization that it was very likely his sudden intervention that caused All Might to lose track of the villain in the first place, making this situation, at least to some degree, his fault. As things get worse and the crowd begins to notice that this is the same villain All Might pursued earlier, they question where he even is, unaware that he's in the crowd with them but not in a position to assist. That's when Deku catches sight of just who it is being victimized by Gwyneth Paltrow's goop. Without thinking, he springs into action, attempting to help despite his own powerlessness.
And this is where we hear it, folks. The song that goes with everything, You Say Run. I'm not gonna lie, this is one of my favourite pieces of music ever composed. It's pretty much the backbone of the brilliant MHA soundtrack. However, this isn't actually the first time we've heard a version of it. We first hear it in episode 1, right after Deku learns he's quirkless, and then we hear it again after All Might saves Deku from the slime villain. There's a lot of reasons the music is used so widely, not only throughout the anime, but also in those countless videos all over the internet. It's been placed in everything from anime to The Incredibles and the freaking Tigger movie. One reason for this is because the track is so generic by nature that its versatility makes it very easy to mold into different arrangements and work for a variety of scenes. And, as many of the You Say Run Goes With Everything videos have shown, it's mainly in the timing of the melodic section, which we'll talk about in a moment. Next time you watch through the series, keep an ear out. You'll spot many variations on this track, and it's amazing how much they add to the feel of the story and the scenes they feature in. The look in Bakugou's eyes is quite sobering in this scene. We can't see the rest of his face, so props to the animators for getting the fear across so well in this one visual. This is very likely the first time in Bakugou's entire life where he's felt as though he had no control or influence over a situation, and also the first time he was incapable of utilizing his quirk to help himself. Even in the absence of All Might, the willingness of the present heroes to stand by and the massive danger posed to him, Deku still charges in to help Bakugou. Deku himself doesn't seem to know why he's done such a reckless thing, but he follows through anyway. There are many instances in disasters of similar responses. We've all seen people who witness a crisis happen and leap into action without a thought for their own safety. And when interviewed afterward or confronted, a lot of these individuals also don't know why it happens. Their bodies just move on their own. More interestingly is that it would have been just as easy for Deku to stand by and do nothing like the others, but not just because of his quirklessness, but because of their history. Sure, the two had known each other for years and years, but given Bakugou's treatment of Deku, I can't say I'd have blamed him if he'd simply decided it was too dangerous and left it to the heroes. Hell, I'd go so far as to say Bakugou is lucky that Deku didn't simply say good riddance and continue on with his life.
As Deku makes his way towards the scene, we see him go into his encyclopedic knowledge of heroes and their fighting tactics, in this case mimicking Kamui Woods. Though quirkless, he still finds a way to put his knowledge into practice, which serves as solid foreshadowing for how he approaches many obstacles waiting in his future. In the sub, Deku thinks, what can I do right now, before throwing his bag. In the dub, he thinks, what would a hero do right now? Both work for their own reasons, but the feeling evoked by the line does change a little bit in the translation. It's also worth mentioning that the book that hits Goop Juice in the eye is about All Might. When asked why he's there, all of the other reasons fall away and Deku simply says that it's because Bakugou looked like he was asking for help. This moment really embodies Deku's ideology on what it means to be a hero, serving as a jumping off point for him to develop a sense of nuance as the story goes on. The section of You Say Run playing during this moment while Deku ponders what led him to this point is significant too. It's the sweeping string section that's so crucial in the timing of this piece. Composer Yuki Hayashi said that this was the section he imagined being the part where the hero emerges, and that's exactly what's happening here. It's the moment where Deku is stepping into the role of a hero, the moment where he begins his journey, even if he doesn't know it yet. Deku's courage spurs All Might to gather enough energy to step in once more. All Might realizes that despite having lectured Deku to basically stay in his lane, he himself wasn't embodying the traits he'd just been talking about. As he said, heroes risk their lives every day, yet there he was standing on the sidelines like everyone else while a child was in danger. Seeing someone who'd made it known he had no quirk step up when the other heroes had not reminded All Might that there's more to being a hero than just power. This is when we get a better understanding of the type of displays of power All Might can conjure up. He quite literally changes the weather with a single swing of his arm, which is a frankly absurd benchmark for any hero to chase. When All Might successfully defeats the villain and saves both boys, we see the steam rising from him, and based on our information as a viewer, we know what that means. He's out of time. With everything cleared up, in the aftermath, we see that despite undoubtedly being the most heroic person on the scene, Deku is being scolded by two heroes for his recklessness. On the other side of that line, Bakugou is being praised merely due to the nature of his quirk, even though he was the one that desperately required rescuing. However, it's clear that Bakugou feels less than stellar about Deku stepping in to save him.
In the following scene where Deku is heading home, Bakugou confronts him, saying he never asked for Deku's help. He goes on to say that Deku didn't help him, and it's obvious that the situation has left him feeling humiliated. Bakugou's pride has been wounded by someone he deems inferior in every way, so owing Deku a debt as a result would only deepen that humiliation. After all, how could he admit to himself that a quirkless nobody like Deku saved him in a situation that his own powerful quirk could not? One thing that struck me was that Bakugou genuinely seems to think that Deku does, or would look down on him for whatever reason. But with the context of later arcs in the story, it makes far more sense. The thing is, even though Deku knows that Bakugou is awful, he looks up to him almost as highly as All Might. Because in all honesty, Bakugou is an undeniably talented individual, and Deku definitely respects that, as we'll see emphasized a little later on. Here's a translation difference worth noting. In the sub, Bakugou tells Deku that he's a quirkless failure who's playing without a full deck. But in the dub, he says Deku is a quirkless failure who wouldn't cut it as a rent-a-cop. With that iteration of the line, he's unknowingly undercutting what All Might said to Deku earlier on the rooftop. Deku ends up telling himself that Bakugou is right. He didn't actually do much or accomplish anything. However, we as the audience know he inspired All Might to act, despite his personal limitations. Just as Deku is returning to reality to think about a more plausible future for himself, All Might returns to speak to him. And he informs Deku that he was able to live up to and embody his ideals because Deku was on the scene. All Might goes on to say that top heroes all have stories from their youth, with most of them having one detail in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. This is a deeply emotional moment for Deku, being told by his idol that he shared an important trait with the top pro heroes that came before. Deku recalls the moment his mother expressed her sorrow and apologized for his quirklessness, knowing being a hero was all her son ever wanted. But Deku admits that the thing he needed to hear most in that moment wasn't an apology. It was that despite his situation, he could still become a hero, which is exactly what All Might affirms for him after seeing just what kind of a person Deku is. Though at this point, Deku has no idea how literal All Might is being here. For all Deku knows, this is just lip service from someone as a token of acknowledgement, not an explicit change in the trajectory of his life. The animation and imagery of this moment are both perfect. The colours, the angle, the characters' positions, and the cherry blossoms floating past the sunset right behind All Might couldn't be more effective. Add to that the grand orchestral arrangement of Yusei Run, and the whole scene gives me chills. It's kind of hilarious how the very last line of the episode is Deku casually dropping the declaration, "Oh, by the way, this is the story of how I became the world's greatest hero."
Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by to check out part 1 of the My Hero Academia video series. I'm going to try to have part 2 ready by the first week of June since I've got a couple of other videos I want to get out this month. As always, a big thank you to these wonderful people for their continued support over on Patreon, with a special shout out to Brendan Carlson, Choen Shin, Stephen PD101, This One's Nick, Totally Reasonable Curb, and Trey Hardy. Patreon members got to see the video as soon as it was finished and in its purest form without the meddling of YouTube's copyright system. So if you'd like to support the channel as well as snag a spot in the credits scroll, consider heading on over to Patreon. Remember to take care of yourselves and others. I'll see you soon, and as always, thanks for watching.